Welcome back to Chat Like a Native. Ready to really level up how you sound in English?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're diving deep into how to speak with authority.
Not just the right words, but how to deliver them so people really listen.
So if you've ever felt a little hesitant speaking English or just want to sound more confident, this is for you.
It's amazing how much grammar and vocabulary kind of takes a backseat when you compare it to confidence and clarity, like projecting credibility, both with your words and your body language.
Okay, so think about when you really need to get your point across, maybe in a meeting or giving a presentation. What makes the difference between people kind of zoning out and really tuning in?
Well, studies have shown that just starting a sentence with a slightly lower pitch can make you sound more authoritative.
Interesting. So it's not about like putting on a fake voice or anything.
Right.
More about like using our voices strategically.
Exactly. Like subtly emphasizing your main points. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be loud or aggressive, just enough to command attention and sound like you really mean it.
Yeah, it's more like confident and engaging.
Right.
So besides pitch, what else can we do with our voices to sound more authoritative?
Oh, varying your pitch throughout the sentence can make a huge difference. Like if you're asking a question, use an upward inflection at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Keeps people engaged. Then when you're making a statement, use a downward inflection to sound certain and final.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
adding punctuation to your voice.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like we're painting with our voices using different tones and stuff to create a more dynamic and engaging soundscape.
Exactly. And speaking of dynamics, don't forget about pauses.
Oh, yeah.
A well-placed pause can do wonders, like create anticipation, emphasize a key point, or just give your audience a moment to absorb what you've just said.
Yeah, I can see how mastering those little things can really change how people hear you.
Yeah.
But it's not just about how we say things right. What about what we actually say?
Absolutely. You're totally right. Delivery is key, but the words themselves matter just as much. Like one mistake I see a lot is using vague or fluffy language. Instead of saying, we had some issues with the project, be specific and direct. Say, we encountered 3 major challenges during the development phase.
So it's about swapping out those kind of filler words
Yeah.
with concrete details and precise language.
Yeah.
I see. It's about painting a clear picture for your listeners so there's no room for misinterpretation.
Exactly. And speaking of painting a picture, let's not forget about the visual side of communication, body language.
Oh, yes. I've always been fascinated by body language.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much we communicate without even saying a word. So how can we leverage body language to sound more authoritative?
One of the simplest yet most effective things is to maintain steady eye contact with your audience. It shows confidence. Engagement builds a connection.
Yeah, but what about if you need to refer to notes or gather your thoughts for a second? Do you have to just intensely stare at people the whole time?
Of course not. It's all about balance. You can definitely glance away to think for a moment, but try to maintain eye contact for the majority of the time.
Right, especially when you're making those key points.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more about being intentional with your eye contact, using it strategically to emphasize your message and create that rapport.
Got it. What about posture?
Oh, good posture is crucial.
Oh, yeah.
Standing or sitting up straight makes you look and feel more confident. It's like you're taking up space and commanding attention just by how you hold yourself.
Yeah, I've heard that before. But I've always wondered, could it make you seem stiff or unnatural? How can we make sure it's confident but still genuine?
Think of it as aligning your body with your intentions. When you feel confident inside, your posture naturally follows. So instead of forcing yourself to be rigid, just focus on feeling grounded and present.
So it's about that balance of feeling comfortable but also in control.
Yeah.
What about hand gestures?
Oh, yeah.
Like I know some people are just naturally more expressive.
Yeah.
Are there any like do's and don'ts with hand gestures if you want to sound more authoritative?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hand gestures are a great way to emphasize your points, add energy to your delivery,
right.
but you don't want to overdo it.
Yeah, you don't want to look like you're conducting an orchestra or something.
Exactly. Think of your hands as tools to highlight your words, not to distract from them. A few well-placed gestures can make your communication more engaging and dynamic.
So it's about that sweet spot between being expressive but keeping it controlled.
Right. And don't forget, different cultures have different norms around hand gestures.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah. It's kind of like how communication styles in general can be so different depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah.
What works in one culture might not work in another at all.
Absolutely. Being sensitive to those cultural differences is super important for effective communication. Like in some cultures, direct eye contact is seen as respectful, while in others, it can be aggressive or challenging.
So how can we navigate those differences and make sure we're communicating respectfully and well in all kinds of settings?
The key is to be aware of the cultural norms of the people you're talking to. Do your research, observe how they interact, and be willing to adjust your style to fit in.
It's about being adaptable and respectful, realizing that good communication isn't one size fits all.
Exactly. And let's not forget about language barriers.
Oh, yeah, especially with English being such a global language.
Yeah.
We often talk to people from all sorts of different linguistic backgrounds. How can we make sure everyone understands each other when there might be language barriers?
I think the most important thing is to speak clearly and not too fast.
Yeah.
And try to avoid slang or idioms that might not be familiar to non-native speakers.
Right.
And just be patient. Sometimes it takes people a little longer to process information if English isn't their first language.
Absolutely. It's about making sure everyone feels welcome and included in the conversation.
Yeah.
So they feel comfortable speaking and being understood.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about communication in the business world specifically. I think that's where a lot of our listeners are looking to improve and sound more confident.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Clear and concise communication is essential in any professional setting.
Absolutely. So what are some things to keep in mind if we want to master business English and communicate really well in those situations?
One thing is to understand the difference between formal and informal language. Generally in business, it's important to be more formal, especially with clients, higher-ups, or people you don't know well.
So knowing when to use please and thank you and addressing people by their titles and all that.
Exactly. But it's also important to be aware of the company culture. Some workplaces are more relaxed, and a little less formality is okay.
So it's about finding that balance between being professional but also fitting in.
Yeah.
What about being specific in how we communicate?
Well, that's huge.
Yeah.
Clarity is king in business. Don't beat around the bush. Instead of saying, we might have some issues, lay it out clearly. Say, these are the problems, and here are some potential solutions.
Right, so it's about being direct solution-oriented and owning your ideas and recommendations.
Exactly. And communication is a two-way street. Remember to listen actively. Pay attention to what others are saying. Ask questions. Show that you're engaged.
It's about making sure everyone feels heard and understood, which ultimately builds trust and stronger relationships.
For sure. And never underestimate the power of preparation.
Oh, yeah.
Before an important meeting or presentation, rehearse your points and really familiarize yourself with the material.
It's like having that mental roadmap that helps you navigate the conversation confidently.
Exactly.
And speaking of preparation, what about all this digital communication these days?
Oh, yeah.
Virtual meetings and online stuff is just the norm for so many of us now.
Yeah.
So is there anything specific we need to think about to sound more authoritative in those settings?
For sure. Virtual communication comes with its own unique challenges and opportunities.
So it's not just about taking our in-person skills and transferring them online.
Right. A lot of the same ideas apply, but there are definitely some things to keep in mind.
Like what? I'm really curious about how to make sure you're coming across clearly and confidently on screen.
Well, first of all, technology is key.
Yeah.
You need a decent microphone and a clear camera to make sure your message is coming through loud and clear.
No grainy video or muffled audio.
Exactly. And just like in person, engaging your audience is crucial online. Try to maintain virtual eye contact by looking directly at the camera, not just at the screen.
Oh, I always forget to do that.
Yeah, it's easy to get distracted by your own image or what's going on in the background.
Right.
It takes practice, but it's worth it. Looking at the camera helps you connect with people and show you're engaged, even though you're not physically in the same room.
It's like bringing that human touch to the digital world. Any other tips for virtual communication?
Yeah, use visuals, slides, videos, infographics. They can all help illustrate your points, keep people interested, and make your presentations more impactful.
It's about grabbing people's attention and making your message memorable, even online.
Exactly. And remember good virtual etiquette.
Right.
Mute your mic when you're not speaking to minimize background noise, and use the chat feature respectfully.
Yeah, it's all about creating a professional and respectful environment where everyone can participate comfortably.
Right. And one more thing, don't forget to follow up. After a meeting, send a summary email outlining the key points and action items.
Right, so you're bringing everything full circle and making those next steps clear.
Exactly. It shows you're organized, proactive, and dedicated to good communication. Now let's talk about something I think a lot of us struggle with: confidence. Knowing all these tics is one thing, but actually feeling confident when speaking English, especially at work, that can be tough.
I agree. Confidence is so important, but it can be hard to find sometimes. What are some things our listeners can do to feel more confident when they're speaking English?
One technique that I find really helpful is visualization. Before a big presentation or something, take some time to picture yourself speaking confidently and clearly. Imagine yourself engaging with the audience, delivering your message with impact, and feeling good about how you did.
It's like making a mental movie where you're the star and you totally nail it.
Exactly. You'd be surprised how powerful that can be. By creating that positive image in your mind, you're basically training your brain to expect success.
Interesting.
So when you're actually in that situation, you'll feel less anxious and more confident.
So it's like a pep talk, but in picture form.
Yeah.
I like it. What about dealing with those pre-speech jitters in the moment? Any advice for that?
Oh, focusing on your breath can really help. When we get nervous, we tend to breathe shallowly and quickly, which actually makes the anxiety worse. But by consciously slowing down your breath and taking deep breath, you can calm your nerves and feel more centered.
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system. Simple, but powerful.
Are there any physical exercises we can do to get rid of tension and boost our confidence? You know, power posing can actually be pretty helpful.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Before a big presentation, find a private space and strike a confident pose. Stand with your feet apart, shoulders back, head held high, and your arms raised in a V shape. Hold it for a couple of minutes while you breathe deeply. You'll be amazed at how much more confident you feel afterward.
Interesting. So it's like tricking your body into feeling more powerful. Does that ever come across as fake, though? Like I'm always worried about seeming inauthentic if I'm too focused on how I look.
That's a good point. Authenticity is always key. But think of power posing as a way to get your inner and outer states in sync. When you feel confident on the inside, it naturally shows on the outside.
Okay, I see. It's not about faking it, but more about tapping into your inner strength and letting it shine through. What about practicing your actual speaking skills? Any tips for making those practice sessions really count?
Absolutely. When you're practicing, focus on speaking clearly at a natural pace, record yourself, and listen back to hear what you can improve, like your pronunciation fluency or intonation. And don't be afraid to play around with different speaking styles to find what feels most natural and authentic for you.
It's about finding your voice and owning it. What
Yeah.
about practicing with other people?
Oh, that can be super helpful.
Yeah.
Find a language partner or a conversation group. It lets you get feedback in real time, try out new vocabulary and grammar in a safe space, and build your confidence through interaction.
It's like having a built-in support system for your English journey. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, what about overcoming language barriers? A lot of our listeners aren't native English speakers, and they might feel intimidated speaking up in professional settings. What advice would you give them?
First and foremost, everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It's part of learning. So don't let the fear of messing up stop you from speaking and expressing yourself. Embrace those mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
Yeah, it's all about having a growth mindset and seeing those slip-ups as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks.
Exactly. And your accent is part of what makes you unique. Embrace it. What matters most is that you can communicate your message clearly and effectively.
It's about celebrating your individuality and letting your personality come through in your English. Now, what about vocabulary? Do you need to know, like, every word in the dictionary to speak with authority?
Not at all. Just focus on building a strong foundation of vocabulary that's relevant to your work or interests.
Right.
Read a lot, watch English language movies and shows, and pay attention to how words are used in different situations. And if you come across a word you don't know, just ask.
Yeah, it's about being curious and constantly adding new words to your toolbox. What about grammar?
Oh.
Does perfect grammar really matter when you're trying to sound authoritative?
While good grammar is important, especially in writing, don't get too hung up on perfection when you're speaking. Fluency and clear communication are more important than getting every little grammar rule right. Focus on getting your message across, and don't let fear of a grammar mistake stop you from speaking up.
Yeah, prioritize clarity and confidence over perfection.
Exactly. And remember, practice makes perfect. The more you speak English, the more comfortable you'll become with the nuances of the language, and the more confident you'll feel expressing yourself clearly and effectively.
So it's all about finding those opportunities to speak English whenever you can, whether it's with friends, colleagues, or even just practicing in the mirror.
Exactly. Every little bit helps. And remember, building confidence in communication is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a process of learning, practicing, and improving your skills over time.
It's about embracing the challenge and celebrating all those wins along the way. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about adapting your communication style to different audiences. We touched on this a little earlier, but it's such an important topic, I think it deserves more attention. What are some things to consider when tailoring your message for different groups of people?
One important thing is the level of formality needed.
Right.
Is it a formal business meeting, a casual chat with coworkers, or a presentation to a big audience? Each situation calls for a different level of formality in your language and how you deliver it.
It's about reading the room and adjusting your approach accordingly.
Exactly. And consider the background and interests of your audience. What do they already know about the topic? What are their perspectives and concerns? Understanding your audience lets you tailor your message so it resonates with them and makes it more relevant and engaging.
Yeah, it's like putting yourself in their shoes and crafting a message that speaks directly to their needs and interests.
Exactly. And pay attention to those nonverbal cues. Are people engaged? Are they nodding along? Or are they looking confused or bored? Being observant lets you adapt your communication on the fly to keep your audience with you and make sure your message is landing.
It's like being a communication chameleon, blending in with the environment and connecting with your audience on their level.
I like that. It's all about being flexible, adaptable, and always striving to communicate in a way that's clear, respectful, and effective.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much ground today, from power posing and vocal techniques to cultural differences in virtual communication. And I know we have even more to share.
We do. Speaking with authority is a skill that can really empower you in all areas of your life. We'll continue our deep dive after a short break. Stay tuned for more actionable advice.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to Chat Like a Native. Before the break, we were talking about building confidence when you speak English. We touched on visualization, breathing exercises, even power posing.
Right, all great ways to manage those nerves and project more confidence. But I think another big part of feeling confident is knowing how to handle feedback, especially when it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Oh, absolutely. Feedback is a gift, even when it's tough to hear. It's a chance to learn, grow, and refine your skills.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Nah.
I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to get defensive when we hear criticism, even if it's meant to be helpful.
Totally normal. Nobody likes hearing negative stuff about themselves. But the key is to try and shift your perspective. Instead of seeing it as a personal attack, see it as valuable information that can help you improve.
So separate the message from the messenger and focus on what's being said, not how it's being said.
Exactly. And really listen to what the person is saying. Ask questions if anything is unclear, and try to understand their point of view. Remember, they're probably trying to help you, not put you down.
It's about turning feedback into a conversation, not a lecture. And I think it's also important to remember that feedback is subjective. What one person sees as a weakness, someone else might see as a strength.
That's a great point. Feedback is often colored by personal preferences and opinions. Take it all in, but trust your own gut too.
So it's about finding that balance between being open to feedback, but staying true to yourself. Now let's talk about something that can be super scary for English learners: public speaking. Even native speakers get nervous about standing up in front of a crowd and giving a presentation.
Public speaking is definitely a challenge, but it's also an amazing opportunity to share your ideas, connect with people, and make a real impact.
But how do you get over those butterflies and deliver a presentation that's both engaging and authoritative?
Preparation is key. Know your material inside and out. That way you'll feel more confident and you can focus on connecting with the audience instead of worrying about forgetting what to say.
So shift your focus from your own anxieties to the people you're talking to. And speaking the audience, how can we make our presentations resonate with different groups of people?
Audience analysis is so important for effective public speaking. Think about who you're presenting to, what they're interested in, and what they want to get out of your presentation. Tailor your message and your delivery style to fit them.
So it's about telling a story that speaks directly to their hearts and minds. What about when those nerves start creeping in during the presentation? Any tips for managing stage fright in the moment?
Deep breathing exercises can work wonders. If you feel yourself getting flustered, take a few deep breaths to center yourself. And remember, it's okay to pause. Silence can actually be really powerful in public speaking. It gives you a chance to collect your thoughts, emphasize a point, or let the audience absorb what you've just said.
It's about using those pauses strategically to create a more impactful presentation.
Exactly. And here's another tip. Try to reframe how you think about public speaking. Instead of seeing it as a performance where you have to be perfect, think of it as an opportunity to share your knowledge and ideas with others.
So shift from a fear of failure to excitement for sharing. Now let's talk about virtual communication, which is becoming more and more important in the workplace. Any strategies for speaking with authority in online meetings or presentations?
Just like with face-to-face communication, clarity, confidence, and engagement are crucial. But online, we need to be even more aware of our nonverbal cues.
That makes sense. You don't have those in-person interactions where you can pick up on subtle body language or facial expressions.
Right, so you have to be more expressive with your voice and use visuals effectively to keep people engaged.
What about things like technology and your online presence? Do those things matter in how you're perceived?
Absolutely. Make sure your tech is working properly, dress professionally, and choose a clean and uncluttered background. They might seem like small things, but they can make a big difference in how people see you.
So it's about setting the stage for a professional and engaging interaction, even if it's virtual. Now, what about actually speaking during online meetings? Any tips for projecting your voice and making sure you're heard?
Speak clearly and at a moderate pace. Enunciate your words, don't speak too quickly or too softly. And remember those pauses. Give people time to process what you're saying, especially if there's a lag in the audio.
Right. It's about pacing yourself and making your words land even through a screen.
Exactly. And look at the camera, not the screen, to maintain that virtual eye contact. It helps you connect with people and shows you're paying attention even though you're not in the same room.
Like that personal touch for the digital age. What about using visuals in online presentations? Any best practices for using slides or videos effectively?
Definitely keep your visuals clean, simple, and easy to understand. Use high-quality images and avoid putting too much text on your slides. And if you're using videos, make sure they're relevant, engaging, and not too long.
It's about using visuals to strengthen your message, not distract from it. Now let's talk about something that can be tough for English learners. Dealing with unfamiliar vocabulary or complicated grammar. How can we navigate those language barriers and still communicate well?
It's all about building your skills step by step. Don't be afraid to ask if you don't know a word. Look for context clues to help you figure out the meaning. And when it comes to grammar, focus on mastering the basics first.
So build a solid foundation and then gradually expand your knowledge. Any resources or strategies you recommend for improving vocabulary and grammar?
Reading is one of the best ways to learn new words and improve your grammar. Pick books, articles, or websites that you enjoy and write down any new words or phrases you come across.
So make reading an active learning experience.
Exactly. And listening to podcasts, watching movies, or even just talking with native speakers can help you improve your listening and pronunciation.
It's about surrounding yourself with the language and making it a part of your daily life.
Right. And remember, learning a language takes time. Be patient, celebrate your progress, and enjoy the journey of discovering English.
I love that. It's about embracing the adventure and never stopping learning. Now, we've been talking a lot about speaking, but listening is just as important for good communication. Any tips for becoming better listeners, especially when English isn't your native language?
Active listening is so important for any conversation. It's about being present, paying attention to both the words and the body language of the speaker, and really trying to understand their message.
So it's not just hearing the words, but actually understanding what they mean.
Exactly. Here are a few tips for improving your active listening. First, make eye contact and use your body language to show you're engaged. Nod your head, smile, and have an open posture. Second, don't interrupt. Let the speaker finish their thought before you jump in. Third, ask clarifying questions. If something isn't clear, don't be afraid to ask. It shows you're really interested in what they're saying.
All great ways to be more present and attentive in conversations. But what about when you hear words you don't know or the grammar is too complex? How do you keep up with the conversation and not get lost?
Don't panic. It's totally normal to come across words or phrases you don't know when you're listening to English. Try to focus on the overall context of the conversation and use what you know about the topic to figure out what those words might mean. You can also jot down any words or phrases you don't understand and look them up later.
So use your critical thinking skills and your knowledge of the world to fill in the blanks. And I think it's also important to remember that everyone communicates differently. Some people are direct, others are indirect. Some people talk fast, others talk slow. Knowing these differences can help you adjust your listening style.
Absolutely. Being flexible and adaptable is so important for good communication, whether you're speaking or listening. Now let's talk about a specific situation where a lot of English learners struggle: Giving and receiving feedback at work.
Oh, yeah. That can be tricky, especially in a professional setting where you want to be honest, but also maintain good relationships.
When you're giving feedback, be specific, objective, and respectful. Focus on the behavior or the action, not the person.
So instead of saying, you're always late, you could say, I've noticed you've been arriving late to meetings lately.
Exactly. And phrase your feedback as a suggestion for improvement, not criticism. Like, I think it would be helpful if you could arrive at meetings on time so we can start promptly.
It's about offering solutions, not just pointing out problems.
Right. And when you're receiving feedback, try to listen with an open mind and don't get defensive. Remember, feedback is a chance to learn and grow.
It's about turning those potentially negative moments into opportunities for positive change.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears again and talk about intercultural communication. In today's global world, it's so important to be able to communicate effectively with people from different cultures.
Absolutely. I think a lot of our listeners want to know how to navigate those cultural differences and avoid misunderstandings. What are some key things to consider when communicating across cultures?
One of the most important things is that culture shapes how we communicate. It influences our verbal and nonverbal language, our values, our beliefs, and our expectations.
So be aware of those cultural differences and adjust your communication style accordingly.
Exactly. For example, some cultures value direct communication while others prefer indirect communication. You have to know these differences and adapt your approach.
So how can we learn about these cultural differences and avoid making mistakes?
Do your research. Read books, articles, or websites about the cultures you'll be interacting with. Talk to people from those cultures and ask questions.
Show that you're curious, respectful, and genuinely interested in learning about their culture.
Right. And when you're communicating with people from different cultures, pay attention to your nonverbal language. Eye contact, gestures, and personal space can have different meanings in different cultures.
So pay attention to those subtle cues and be aware of how your own nonverbal behavior might be interpreted.
Exactly. And be patient. It takes time to build rapport and trust with people from different cultures.
Embrace the journey and appreciate the richness that cultural diversity brings to communication.
Well said. Now let's talk about a topic that's becoming more and more important in the workplace. Inclusive language.
Yes, it's so important to create a communication environment where everyone feels respected, valued, and included, no matter their background or identity.
Absolutely. Inclusive language is about using words and phrases that avoid bias and promote respect for all individuals.
So be mindful of the impact our words can have and choose language that's welcoming and inclusive.
Exactly. For example, instead of using gendered language like businessman or policeman, use gender-neutral terms like business person or police officer.
Recognize that language is always evolving and we need to evolve with it.
Right. And avoid language that reinforces stereotypes or perpetuates bias.
So challenge our own assumptions and biases and consciously use language that is equitable and inclusive.
Now let's talk about another important part of good communication. Giving and receiving compliments.
Oh yeah, compliments are a great way to build relationships, boost morale, and create a positive work environment.
When giving compliments, be sincere and specific. Instead of saying, you did a great job, say, I really appreciated your attention to detail on that project.
Make your compliments meaningful and memorable.
Exactly. And when you receive a compliment, accept it gracefully. Don't downplay your accomplishments or deflect the praise. Just say, thank you, I appreciate that.
Acknowledge the positive feedback and let it sink in. Now let's switch gears one last time and talk about something that can be nerve-wracking for English learners. Job interviews.
Job interviews are definitely high-pressure situations, but with good preparation and practice, you can boost your confidence and show off your skills effectively.
So what are some tips for acing those interviews and making a great impression?
First, do your homework. Research the company and the position thoroughly. It shows the interviewer you're serious about the opportunity and that you've taken the time to learn about them.
It's about showing initiative and genuine interest.
Exactly. And practice answering common interview questions. Think about your skilled experiences and accomplishments and have concise and compelling answers ready.
So be prepared to articulate your value and highlight your strengths.
Right. And during the interview, maintain professional body language, make eye contact, and speak clearly and confidently.
Project an image of competence and professionalism.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. It shows you're engaged and interested in the role and the company.
Turn the interview into a conversation, not just a question and answer session.
And always follow up with a thank you note after the interview. It's a simple way to reiterate your interest and leave a good impression.
It's about going the extra mile and showing your appreciation.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from managing nerves to acing job interviews.
We have. We've talked about so many aspects of communication, from body language to cultural awareness to the ins and outs of online interactions. I think our listeners have learned a lot about how to improve their communication skills and sound more confident in any situation.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into speaking with authority in English, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Communication is a skill. And like any skill, it can be improved with practice, feedback, and a willingness to learn and grow.
That's a great reminder. It's about embracing the journey and always striving to become more confident and effective communicators.
Exactly. We'll continue our discussion after a short break with some final thoughts and key takeaways. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Chat Like a Native. We've covered a ton in our deep dive into speaking with authority, from nailing those vocal techniques to understanding cultural differences to totally rocking job interviews.
It's been quite a journey. We've explored so much about communication, and I really hope our listeners are feeling ready to take their English to the next level.
Me too. So before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your top takeaways. Like, what are the most important things for our listeners to keep in mind as they work on their communication skills?
Well, the first thing to remember is that speaking with authority, it's a skill, not a talent. You can learn it and get better with practice and effort.
That's so important. It's not about being born a certain way. It's about developing your abilities over time.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to practice is just to get out there and speak English as much as you can. Don't be afraid to mess up. See those mistakes as opportunities to learn and keep pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Yeah, it's about taking those little steps each day to build up your confidence and fluency.
Absolutely. And another key takeaway is to always think about your audience. Who are you talking to? What are they interested in? What do they expect? Then you can tailor your message and how you deliver it to really connect with them.
So it's about being flexible with your communication style to match the people and the situation.
Right. And remember, communication goes both ways. Listening actively is just as important as speaking clearly. Pay attention to what people are saying. Ask questions to make sure you understand and show them you're engaged.
It's about having a real back and forth, not just talking at people.
Exactly. And last but not least, don't forget about your body language, how you hold yourself, your eye contact, your tone of voice. All of these things play a role in how you come across and how your message is received.
It's about creating a strong and consistent image of yourself, both with your words and your actions.
Well put. If you focus on these key takeaways and keep practicing your communication skills, you can become a much more confident, engaging, and authoritative speaker in English.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. I feel like I've learned so much valuable information and practical tips today.
Me too. It's been great sharing these insights with everyone.
Well, on that note, a huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us on Chat Like a Native. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep those conversations going.
Until next time.